Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. So today I'm really delighted to introduce and share Mrs. Tricia Eastman with you. She is an author and medicine woman, and I just had the privilege to read her remarkable book, Seeding Consciousness. I'm so excited to dive in with her today, introduce you to her work and her vision. You know, she has really lived a devoted life to the medicine path, and it's so hard to articulate so much of this work and so much of this experience, and she does it so beautifully. So thank you, Tricia, so much for being with us today.
It's such an honor. Thank you for your work. And we've been talking back and forth for about a year now. And we finally discovered that we're both really big, huge fans of human design. I started reading human design, I think when it first came out, and human design is based off of the I Ching for those of you that are not familiar with it. And so we were just talking about how interesting it is that there's so many people in the space that are holding space that, carry this unique archetypal code. And there's, a lot of prophecies around human design that is less talked about, which is this crossing that we're going through, which will culminate in 2027, kind of moving into, and it's not really a new age prophecy. It's really based on the cycles of the planets, and a lot of the indigenous prophecies, such as the Hopi prophecy and the Kogi prophecies, the eagle and the condor, for example, talk about this and how the projectors play a big role in kind of supporting society in a new way of leadership, which is less about attachment, less about power, more about holding the space to bring others' gifts out, giving everyone a voice, taking consideration of all stakeholders, and it being a new type of leadership that's quite the opposite of the old kind of kingship or patriarchal format that has been a big part of our society.
Beautifully expressed. Yeah. I mean, it's so fun to see all the different lineages that have been speaking about this time we're living in right now and seeing real time all of these prophecies come to fruition. So thank you for being together in this moment. I'd love to start with Tricia's background and bio, if I may. So Tricia is a lineage-honoring medicine woman and founder of the nonprofit Ancestral Heart, bridging worlds rooted in her mestiza ancestry with profound insights from a decade of Bwiti initiations and training. A renowned speaker, artist, and writer, Eastman has been privileged to engage with audiences at Stanford University's D School, the World Economic Forum, and on Gaia TV's Psychedelica. Eastman has curated transformative retreats worldwide with plant medicines, as well as facilitated the psychospiritual program with Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT at Crossroads Treatment Center in Mexico. Her wellness retreat center, Hue, I love the name, in Portugal, is scheduled to open in 2025. So welcome, Tricia. So excited to dive in with you. I would love to begin with one of the things I've been seeing this year in our community is people really reawakening to their lineage, to their medicine in a very rapid quantum manner that I haven't seen before. And a lot of them live very quote unquote normal lives. And a lot of their path is like, how do I bridge these worlds, right? And so reading the book and learning about your background, because you started off, you had quite a normal suburban thing going on, and then you fast forward and you're in a tin hut on concrete slab in the dark for 7 days being initiated in Africa. And it's like, how do you go from this to this? And so I would love for you to take us as much as you would like to share on that journey of what that was like to take that leap of faith and pretty much leave everything familiar to follow your heart and your soul path.
It's interesting because I first got connected to psychedelics through the rave scene in my teens and 20s. And I worked at a psychedelic bookstore called Raver Books. And I remember looking at Tycal, Fikal, Alexander Shulgin's books, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, Be Here Now. And I feel like it was always an important part of my life. But I think the modern day, at the time, view of psychedelics was that they were, harmful to the brain, which we find is quite the opposite. And although I partook in a lot of, recreational use, I always did it intentionally. And then as I got introduced to more of the indigenous ways of working with the medicine, it really, truly blew my mind. And that all kind of initiated when I was 28 and a half, which is, in astrology, your Saturn returns, which is when, people go through these major life changes. And I don't talk about this a lot, but I had a very hard childhood. I was bullied really badly. And I felt really kind of imprisoned by, the support that I got from my family that was not really conducive to being able to function in the life that I was living, literally being harassed by women in school every day. And so I was a gifted student. I was in program for the academically talented. I ended up just getting into trouble in school because I needed to break out of that, system. And I ended up dropping out and then going to community college. And so I started working full time when I was 16 years old. And then by the time I was in my 20s, I had bought 4 houses. I had a business with 13 locations. I was doing spa and wellness consulting. I started a women's networking group with a group of sisters called Girl Power Hour. And we had 16,000 women in our community. And we had all these big companies like Dove sponsoring us for these red carpet events. And yet inside, I was, being a mentor, just projectors are in the community, showing leadership, but wasn't feeling that alignment that the American dream was really the actual dream. I didn't know what the real dream was because I felt like I had everything and I worked my ass off for it. It wasn't like it was handed to me like I was a dropout. I had to figure things out. So I had got to this point at a very young age where, kind of early in the game, and I think because I dropped out, I kind of had a head start. And I realized I didn't want it all at all. And so at the time I was married, and I had this moment where I realized I actually took MDMA at a rave. I was taking it on the weekends. And this is when I was 28 and a half. And I just had this awakening where I was just I can't do this anymore. I need to go find my true purpose and my true life. Essentially, here I was, ready to give up my entire life. And I did. And, that's one of those moments where people are in a psychedelic experience. And I know you've probably witnessed this too, where they're I need to make a big change. Well, I probably did it the wrong way in some respects, throwing the baby away with the bathwater, because I divorced my husband. I gave away 4 houses in Seattle, which were probably worth a lot of money, right? I know they're worth a lot of money right now. So I gave away my nest egg. I didn't really have a support system. I had some cash, and I went and traveled in Europe. And during that time, I got some really deep insights about myself, my purpose, really went deep into the holistic studies, which was something I'd already been studying as a spa consultant. You know, I was studying aromatherapy, herbalism, shiatsu massage, different types of healing modalities, such as, you know, energy therapies like pranic healing and Reiki, because you have to know about these things when you're building these, you know, wellness experiences. And I was super interested in learning everything, as I always have been. And so essentially what happened was I ended up running out of money, being homeless, you know, went from having a car to getting my car repossessed. I had an Audi A5, watched it get like towed off, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll figure it out. I'll get back on my feet. And because, you know, in these psychedelic experiences and these deep, like doing work, like even Kundalini yoga and holotropic breath work, there's so much disintegration that it can be really ungrounding. So literally I had to, over several years, kind of lose everything that I had. Literally, you know, I remember going to my storage unit in Seattle where I had saved everything after traveling and having to like sell it all off. So I was literally carrying like one bag on my shoulder. And I think for me, because of, you know, just the deep reset I needed to be able to step into service in the way that I was called to next, I needed to kind of let go of all that. That's not everyone's path. And I always recommend anyone making a big change in their life to do it slowly, to really listen. And I truly do believe that we're guided in this process. So ask for lots of signs and make sure you get lots of signs. So essentially, you know, about 3 years of that, I met my partner, Dr. Joseph Barsulia, and synchronistically, we both got asked to work at Crossroads at exactly the same time. So during that time, I was really building my foundation. I was really fortifying all of my spiritual practices, all the things that happened from this kind of mystical awakening that I experienced and the self-exploration. I really grounded all of that in. And then I received that invitation to work at Crossroads, facilitating the psycho-spiritual program. At the same time, my ancestors on my mother's side are from Mexico, and they are Triqui, Mixtec, Mayan. And so my great-great-great-grandmother, Jesus, had a boarding house, and she provided housing for migrant workers. She was single, widowed. We don't really know the backstory because it's so many generations back, but she was single and she had this boarding house, and that's how she took care of her 2 daughters. So essentially, that's where she was introduced to Santeria, which actually kind of got blended into our mestiza practice, which if you know a little bit about mestiza, it's kind of a mix of all the traditions, but they all have a lot of core principles around prayer and herbalism and, you know, medicine work, working with different medicines such as psilocybin, for example. And then Santeria has been, or, you know, the traditional Yoruban practices, which are its roots from Africa, have been melded with a lot of those traditions because of colonization. So that was like what my great-great-grandmother and my great-grandmother Maria and my grandfather.
Fascinating. And those of you wondering, like, when does she get to the tin hut? We'll get to the tin hut.
Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I got so long-winded on it. I apologize. Okay, guys. So essentially, I started working at Crossroads, and then I met a Nima from Gabon who left Gabon. and got connected with a village there where my Bwiti father, who has passed to Tumrabinga, lives, and it's called Okala Village. And that's in the Fang tradition of Bwiti. And literally, when it was time for me to go to Gabon, I knew it. And what was really interesting, and I don't always see this happen in the initiatory frameworks, is that the Nima did an initiation, and he did a divination. And in the divination, he determined that it wasn't actually time for me to be there yet. So we waited about 6 months, and I checked back in with him, and he said, now it's time for you to come. So I had other initiations outside of Gabon. And one thing I will say about Bwiti is that when you get initiated, it's a serious thing. And it's a responsibility. It's a commitment to your community, your village, because once you're initiated into Bwiti, you become Bwiti. And so it's like you're part of this, social initiatory group, a family. Your Bwiti initiator is called your father. It's like your father who's bringing you into this community. And so when a lot of people talk about this idea of wanting to get initiated, I truly believe that it's something that's serious. And when it's done properly, you're protected. But when it's not done properly, there are a lot of risks. And that can be tropical diseases such as malaria and dengue, which I know people who have died in Gabon as a result of going and getting initiated and getting certain tropical diseases, specifically one with malaria. And then the other is, are you willing to fulfill your responsibility as an initiate? And if you are not intending to maintain that relationship, and that relationship involves reciprocity, that relationship involves regular communication, and really like a responsibility to protect the tradition and the biocultural heritage of Bwiti. And so, there is a lot of people that think they want to go, they get initiated one time because they think that gives them the permission to work with Iboga. And that's not the case. It usually happens that, you have a conversation or in your first initiation, in the processing of your visions, you share something with the Nima and they say, oh, well, this determines that this particular vision that you had means that you are also to be a Nima. And then usually what happens after that is that they tell you have to move to Gabon and live there for 10 years. And if you're not willing to, you're obviously not fulfilling your initiation, because that's what the medicine said is like, you're meant to be an initiator. So, now you have to move here and train for 10 years. And I would say like it's a minimum of 10 years of training, but it's a new thing and very new in the sense that there's only a couple initiators that speak English. There's only a couple groups that have started doing initiations where they bring in translators, where a Westerner will come in and say, like me, I worked at an Abigail clinic. I've been working with the medicine. I've worked with several thousand people already. Obviously, I would have loved to have started on the right foot. And I'm coming to you and I want to share with you how we do what we do and get your blessing that I can continue to do that. And that was the case when I went to Gabon. A lot of the heart behind it was I had already been practicing, and not knowing these things because, again, a lot of the Nima do not speak English and have not been out there speaking publicly, although it's becoming more and more common now, especially in the last year. And going and saying, this is what we're doing. Is this okay? And essentially the answer was, if you want to give initiations, you need to move here and you need to be here for 10 years. And if you're doing this as healings, as psychospiritual healings with the wood, with iboga, you can't call it an initiation, and you're not graduated. You're still in training. And, you know, you need to stay connected and maintain that relationship. So, you know, that was the answer that I received when I went there. And, you know, ever since then, you know, and even before that, you know, my focus has really been around the biocultural preservation of the culture of Bwiti as well as Iboga. But I think on a bigger scale, when we're thinking about climate change, which is a real problem, especially right now where most of the Amazon is on fire, and we think about the lungs of our planet, you know, the two biggest rainforests are in South America, the Amazon, and then equatorial Africa. And so the work that we're doing is preservation and conservation work with the equatorial rainforest, and the most kind of robust and wild part of it being in Gabon and throughout the Congo Basin.
Thank you so much. One of the things I would love to get your reflections on, and I think you write so beautifully about it, is, you know, here in the West, we want to race to the end. Of everything. We don't like to take the time to really apprentice ourselves and take our time. And we're seeing a lot of instability and destabilization of people who are going from 0 to a 5-MeO experience or straight to an ayahuasca experience. And we don't, part of the problem, I think, is we've been so disconnected from ritual and our roots and our lineages that we don't have words for some of these things anymore. You beautifully wrote about the notion of, and please correct my pronunciation, Negrado,
yes.
Negrado, Albedo,
yeah.
And Rubedo.
So, yeah, when we think about this understanding of the process of awakening, there's actually a really good book that just came out by Ken Wilber called Radical Wholeness. Have you heard of it? And he talks about really like there being two separate existing aspects of integration. One of those is waking up and one is growing up. And waking up is when you have an experience like the Buddha had on the Bodhi tree, where he, you know, really understood the design of everything, which is very similar to what people experience in 5-MeO and with other psychedelics. The second is growing up, and growing up is processing the material underneath all of that that's sitting in the unconscious mind, so that our own being and how we live and respond and act actually goes up to meet that point of, you know, balance. And that really is that understanding of wholeness. And I think it's one of the best models. And the way that we get there is through inner alchemy. Alchemy, you know, very simply explained that essentially within us, just like crude oil is converted into gasoline, which we use to move us in the world, our own shadow material, our own dark matter within actually is alchemically converted into gold, which essentially represents life force energy that moves us throughout our life. So a lot of times when we're in these places of stagnancy, it's because we've run out of that fuel, because we haven't dipped down into the tar pits, pulled up a chunk of that raw earth, which is Kem, which Kemet is the original name of Egypt, which was, you know, known for the richness of the earth and agriculture. This is where we take that material and we use that to transform it into our life force. You know, if we were growing crops, like in the idea of seeding consciousness, we would be planting seeds in that soil. That soil would be collecting the sun, which is alchemically the same thing as gold, and that would be growing. We would be consuming that as life force energy in our body. So essentially, you start off, the Negredo is whatever problems you have at hand. When we're taking the idea of looking at the unconscious, what is blocking us? And the more that we take a contemplative approach with it, and rather than trying to fix it or solve it or move through it, the idea is to gain understanding through giving focus, which the idea of attention and focus is actually a form of self-love. And so through that presence, attention, and focus, we start to receive information about that. And then the albedo process is very much this idea of really tapping into intuition. For some people and in some traditions, this could be through prayer. This could be through tapping into ancestors, tapping into guides, using medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin. That is the albedo. So it's giving us this kind of deeper clarity. It could be holotropic breath work, it could be shamanic drumming, but it's essentially this way of dropping into a altered state where we completely from an open place receive information. So we take the information that we understand about the muck that we're holding in our hand. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? How is it impacting me? Where do I feel it in my body? All these different pieces. And then we're really tapping into this other level of consciousness that's outside of the physical reality, and we're really listening. And through bringing the two of those together through this kind of integration process of bringing these two pieces and spending the time and attention, there should be at some point, some essence of what's the next step? It could be what's the next tiny step? Maybe it's just breathing. It could be, a major life decision, like I need to leave my job. And then through the Rubeda is it's the Mars energy. So the Negredo is essentially the shadow. Albedo is tuning into kind of, in essence, like the moon, getting connected to, higher consciousness and intuition and inner wisdom. And then the energy of Mars, which is about taking action, is Rubeda. And through the Rubeda, we've transmuted something alchemically has happened where there's now gasoline in the tank to where actually we can use that Mars energy and we can move forward until, we get to the next point. And it's this ongoing process of constantly pausing and dipping in to the unconscious, dipping into the Negredo, which is essentially how we move in life. And I think in our modern era, there's just not enough of that pausing, and there's not enough of that kind of bringing these two worlds together. And I would say over the years of my work, personally, in doing this, I've really learned to slow down, and the insights and the information that I get is so profound, and many times alerting me ahead of time of things that I don't even know about, to where I'm already positioned in the right place. So, when we talk about the idea of, this isn't just to solve your problems. This is to perform in your highest optimal way without even knowing it. It's a way of moving in the world.
Love it. So beautifully said. My next question, we touched on the prophecies a little bit earlier, where human design prophecies in 2027, there's a great change happening. The Kogis in 2026 is happening, and we're getting quite close. Mm-hmm. One of the elements that I love that you delve into in the book is the role of the sun and the moon. and the luminaries and the balance of those two forces. So I would love you to share a little bit about that. I know you talk about the cycle of the sun. We are closer to the sun versus when we are farther from the sun as a human society. So I know a lot of our listeners will be fascinated to learn about that. So I'd love for you to reflect on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in this modern era, and I would say in a lot of more the new kind of, I guess I'll use the word new age kinds of spirituality, they talk about the rebirth of the feminine. And I don't really feel like that's accurate. When we look at the understanding of the world that we live in, it's a world of duality. But through the duality, we are to come into balance within, and that's the heart. And it's like this understanding of coming into center in any situation. And, when we think about the sun is the external side of our operating system. This is where we seek outside, where we're doing. I feel like in our society, society has been kind of created in this way where it actually pushes people in that direction because, it's all about growth and progress through expansion. And, that is a quality of the sun, but it's actually not what real growth and progress are. As we know, growth and progress are through balance and through coming into deeper love and compassion through that greater understanding of reconciliation, of balance of the duality that we live in, of the dark and the light. So, I think it began back when we stopped using fire because our relationship to the elements is so important because it's a mirror of our relationship within ourselves. So that's the relationships to earth, air, fire, and water. But the two most important elements when we look at our lessons as humans are fire and water because they represent the masculine aspects and the feminine aspects, although they have qualities of both. And when we look at the archetypal layout of, our planetary solar system, the two most important luminaries or influences in our system are the sun and the moon. And, we've done a lot of work in our society paying attention to solar cycles and even working against them. But we have very little acceptance and understanding in our modern day of the lunar cycles and how the lunar cycles impact us when they move the entire oceans. They affect people's psyche during full moons and eclipses and all of these different astrological events. And so the minute that we took fire away in our society, we lost that relationship. And this is why I believe, even though it's dangerous to have your own fireplace in your house, to always cook your food on gas, I believe there's something alchemical to cooking on a flame and what it does to the body, just like a plant takes in sun. If you take in artificial light on a plant, it's not going to be as healthy as taking in the real sunlight, and fire is a representation of the sun. So the reason we stopped using fire was because, in the early 1900s, every major city burnt down from an accident with fire. And I believe when these fires come in these big ways, in these events, it's a cleansing of some kind of energy. And it happens exactly that way in nature, such as with forest fires. And our society has been so trying to control nature. I was trying to think of a better way to put it, but we've exerted our control over nature, including, we've got to mitigate these risks of fire. But the reality is the risk of fire has to do with our relationship to fire. I know people on properties where fires came through and they made daily offerings to their land, like they gave food plates and they offered tobacco and they made water offerings. And literally you could see a borderline around the property where the fire literally skipped around it. And so I do believe there is also a esoteric relationship with fire, and that the only way to protect yourself from it, because hey, we're still having fires, we're still having issues with fires, even though we're controlling it to the nth degree, we're still having issues, is to restore our relationship with fire. So I think that's like first priority, in that fire really represents the masculine. And I believe like when we look at our relationship in the masculine, it's gotten really out of balance. And then we have, the relationship to the moon, and that's the relationship to the intuition, the relationship to water. If we look at society and we look at our relationship to water, pretty much most of the world does not have clean drinking water. Tap water in major metropolitan cities has laundry lists of chemicals. It's been polluted. It's toxic. Our oceans, which, Jungian psychology says the oceans represent the unconscious mind. Our oceans are literally littered with plastic waste, mercury, all of these toxins. And it's our relationship to that water, that connection, which is the movement of energy through love, through grace, through the connection to our heart and compassion, and how, literally, water is the universal solvent. It can dissolve anything and break anything, and we need that water. We need that relationship with water to break up the toxins in our body, in our psyche, to heal ourselves. In Bwiti-initiation, before you're even initiated, you go through days of bathing rituals where you're sitting with the water and you're praying with the water. You're essentially making what they call confessions. And I hate to it sounds very Catholic when you say that, but I think it's actually really useful, because it is really just an inner inventory of the things you've done to hurt yourself and the things you've done to hurt others, to bring awareness in how you're moving. And then the water is the reset button. It's essentially washing away that past programming, that past behavior, those toxins, that toxic behavior, and then you're moving forward, cleansed and with the opportunity to make new choices. So, I believe that the most important thing about the moon, because I could talk about the moon forever, is our connection to creativity. Because, in our society, we're like, go, 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 push, push, push. And a lot of times to our own demise, in the sense that we make costly mistakes. We, have things that happen, whether it's economic or natural disasters or all of these things. If I think about the idea of, all the times I've listened and not done things that could have cost me a lot of money, and then things I haven't listened that have cost me a lot of money, I'd rather not make those decisions. And I believe that, that's where the tapping into those creative cycles is so important. When we think about the moon, it moves in a cycle of 28 days, but within those cycles, you have peak cycles, for women when they're in their stage of ovulation, because the womb and the moon are interconnected, and those cycles are interconnected. It's when women have the peak energy. And when a woman is on her moon cycle, which is the phase of the moon that is the least energetic, it's more of an inward time, you're not going to be productive. So if you're trying to go out there and do stuff, you're going to struggle. It's going to be difficult. if your phone is dead, you're not going to try to use it when the battery's not charged, and you're going to be more careful when the phone is, down. If you thought of like the moon cycles as like the little battery button on your phone, and you're like, oh, the battery's full, we can like move, let's do this. You're just going to have so much more prosperity, less suffering, and more possibility in your life. And here we are in a society that's focused on GDP and all of these other crazy things, rather than thinking about, oh, if we're all trying to like do this and this and this, and it's the worst time, it's just going to be catastrophic. And I've seen that, like, this eclipse that we're in is gnarly. And eclipses are one of those times where everything from either a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse, it creates a lot of upheaval. And lunar eclipses, full lunar eclipses, are equal to an entire 28-day cycle. So that means all the stuff that happens to an entire month essentially happens within, usually it's like plus or minus a couple days. It's usually like a 5-day window, but really the most intense part being in the middle, like the 3 days. So 1 day on each side and the actual day. But that time, you don't want to be starting anything new. You don't want to be trying to accomplish things. You don't want to be like doing any kind of asks that, are something that, putting it out there then could mean complete failure, because, you just wait a couple days on the other side and you're going to have a lot more success. And so it's like, really simple things, but I mean, not that complex. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you learn not to touch the hot stove. And then after that, you get it. It's like, once you understand, then it's really easy to move in harmony with the sun and the moon. And I want to add, after writing this book, I discovered Ian McGilchrist's work, which is The Master and His Emissary. And I loved how he explained things in a neuroscience perspective, that essentially the left hemisphere of the brain, which is the logical mind, is bigger than the right, which is our, more moon mind, the, more feminine, archetypal and intuitive mind. And the problem we have in our society is essentially we're like only using half of our brain, and when you look at geniuses, and I talk about this in the book, Einstein had one of the most highly developed corpus callosum, and that was because he was a musician, an artist, and an academic, a researcher and scientist. And so, we have to develop both minds, and psychedelics definitely help to develop the right brain. But then there's a lot of creative and spiritual practices, which many people may not really see the value of it immediately, but think about that over time as you're taking that time to really develop that hemisphere of the brain. You're actually strengthening the bridge between the corpus callosum and, strengthening the corpus callosum itself. And you're, allowing your mind to be fully, activated and have access to it all.
Beautiful. Absolutely. I mean, we see that real time working with psychedelics and microdosing. It really, really lights up that dormant part of people's minds and that right-hand side. Absolutely. Beautifully said. I'd love to, given your present circumstances, I would love to share with the audience that right now, when we're recording this together, Tricia has been displaced. She has a home in Asheville, and so she and her husband are safely nestled in Charlotte, safely. But we were talking before the episode began about how, these macro events are tied closely to our inner events that are happening right now, and also reflected in these times of prophecy that have been predicted, that this is a cleansing and a purging, a time of upheaval and destruction. So I'd love for Tricia to share, for her perspective from being in one, presently, and also speak to, I think people are really seeing real time with the last, especially 6, 7 years with the forest fires and the increasing intensity of the weather and flooding and the toxins, and seeing how much deceit we have been living under. I think almost every day there's something in the news where something is being uncovered and unearthed, a truth that we held that is coming to light. And so it can be really, really lead people to despair right now. So I would love for you to speak to that, but also to what the prophecies speak to beyond 2026, 2027. Why are we going through this purge, and what is on the other side of this moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. And forgive me, like I said, being in the midst of this, in Asheville, there's still no power, no water, no cell service. There are many people stranded. We were there at the beginning of the storm, and through the first couple days of outages, and we realized it wasn't safe to continue to stay. And so we essentially set up all of our neighbors the best way we could with water, gave away our own supplies. And it was such a crazy thing because I had felt something coming, and we were already planning to move, and I had everything ready. And I literally went through all of our emergency supplies. I threw out all the expired stuff in our cabinets, and we were just like, the minute it happened, we had everything like perfectly lined up and ready to go. And so I feel like I was really prepared, and I see that I was meant to be here to witness this. Now I'm safe in Charlotte, North Carolina, which strangely was not impacted as severely as Asheville. I mean, Asheville is completely destroyed. I mean, I still feel like I'm in shock in the sense that it's still in progress. And that's probably why my mind, earlier I kind of like lost track. But essentially, the Kogi, I work really closely with them through my nonprofit, Ancestral Heart. I met Mama Louise in 2015, and I've been working really closely with the Mamus since 2018. My nonprofit has worked in collaboration with a local nonprofit, Nativa Foundation, in Colombia, along with another group called The Fountain, run by grandmother Jotima, who was the convener of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers Council. And essentially, we're on our fourth land trust. We've created a food program for the children in the village, in the first village in La Sierra, Nevada, working with Tungeka Village. Sorry, my brain's slow today. They gave us a message earlier this year, and the message was that the mother is calling all of her children to service. Now, all hands on deck. We are here as humans, as incarnated beings on this planet, to be stewards of this planet. That's our job when we come here. Like, if we are here, like, our primary thing, it's not about money. It's not about the primary goal is to, take care of nature, to make sure that, and the Kogi do that. Their job is to maintain the water cycles of the planet, to activate sacred sites so that they're functioning properly, to make pagamento offerings, which means payments, which essentially maintain the balance between man and nature. And it's not just the indigenous traditions that have this responsibility. And there's many different tribes all throughout Europe, and they're all nature-based and, believe in more of like an animistic philosophy, which is that we believe nature is alive and we treat it as a human being, as an entity, and we take care of it, and we exchange gratitude for what is given to us. And these are sets of original principles that exist within every indigenous culture around the entire globe that have existed for thousands of years. And so the Kogi are essentially saying what every other indigenous tribe is saying: it's time to step forward and remember who you are, remember your indigenous roots, and step forward and take care of this planet. And what they said, the prophecy, was that by June 2024, we're going to start seeing the effects of, if we don't step forward, the effects of that there's going to be massive natural disasters beyond what we could ever imagine. And when I was in Asheville, I witnessed that. You should not have a level 4 hurricane in the mountains. It doesn't even match science's understanding of what we know about hurricanes. And us as people who have lived, how old is America? Like 300 years old, maybe less, not very old. We have these histories, and we talk about the idea of 100-year floods, but this is nothing compared to that. And what we're in for is nothing compared to that, but we still have time. And I may not have the answers, but I have one hunch. And that hunch is that if we empower the indigenous elders like the Kogi, like Mindahi Bastida, who's an Atomi Toltec elder that I work with really closely, like Rotendo Nagara, who's a Zulu elder. If we empower these elders and we ask them to direct us in what to do, and we support them financially, because that's the world we live in. We need money to get things done still, which is buying plane tickets and food to get these elders at G20, COP16, COP20, all of these important events that are happening where they need to have a voice, because, right now, the current systems, like the World Economic Plans for sustainability, are like, let's get rid of all gas, all fire. Let's do carbon credits for, people to wash their sins from flying a private jet or companies, or let's monitor every human and their carbon footprint and penalize them for it, which doesn't really make sense, because then people with families are unfairly financially punished for the fact that babies wear diapers, or, who knows, lots of other things as well. And I think that we need to really come together. And I believe there are people in the West that have great modalities and wisdom related to us, I think, first approaching things from a trauma perspective, healing our trauma. I love Thomas Hubel's work around that. I really love Theory U facilitation, which came out of MIT. Which is really about getting into the emotional body in situations of looking at groups of stakeholders coming together and connecting around specific issues and learning. And I feel that if we can bring in more of these leaders alongside with indigenous leaders, alongside with people that are leading the way related to how we can collectively work together. And I would call these people like world bridgers, people that can essentially spread these messages and language them to reach the masses, so that the understanding can land, so that we can all, kind of put our hands on the deck, like all hands on deck, and move forward. And I have great hope. Because as we talked about the idea of the sun cycles and the idea of our entire solar system, when we think about the Yuga cycles, we're in this And it's disputable because of, there's many planetary factors that can plus or minus things by thousands of years, but it's believed based on the ancient Vedic texts that we're in the Kali Yuga cycle, which is kind of this cycle of the deepest darkness, but we're moving back towards the light. And the understanding in these cosmovisions is that there is a source of central energy in the cosmos, which many people, when they experience 5-MeO, they describe it exactly as these ancient texts. And the closer you are, according to these Vedic texts, the easier it is for one to awaken. As we're the time that we're in right now, pretty much every human on the planet has access to every plant medicine, every healing modality, every spiritual practice. So the potential of us, reaching this place where we can maintain balance with nature and kind of, advert this timeline, or at least have a lesser impactful timeline. I feel really good about it. I feel like nature and the cosmos is meeting us in this opportunity that we have, and we have an opportunity to literally take a great leap forward. So I'm really excited. And yeah, that's what I'm here to do, to support that.
Oh, thank you. I love in your book, you spend a significant part of the book honoring your mentors and your teachers. And I was struck by how incredibly diverse it is, and how diverse your experience across medicines, across lineage and traditions. And it was really beautiful because I believe we have a birth and a blood lineage, but I think we also, each of us has a spiritual lineage that transcends our country, our geography, our ethnicity. It's our soul home. So I would love for you to speak to anything you would like as in terms of your teachers, mentors, if you'd like to highlight any of them and some of the greatest teachings that you have taken from them.
I would say that the greatest gift that you have with any spiritual teacher isn't what they say. It's the transmission of them as their presence and their being. And that goes beyond words, and it goes beyond comprehension. But I would say that it's palpable. Every Indigenous elder, and there's hundreds more from all the different gatherings that I've done over the years with different conferences and different things all over the world with Ancestral Heart, and even before that. And being in the room in that field of consciousness, I definitely feel that there's work being done that goes far beyond what I can even explain and understand. And I don't know if it'd even be fair if I tried to, because it's so, it's like trying to explain your 5-MeO experience when you've completely dissolved into, unity with the universe, and some spiritual traditions say that you're not even to talk about those experiences, like in some of the ancient mystery schools. One example I can give you is that in Bwiti, when you become a Nima, which is your 10-year initiation or longer, and a divination is done that shows that you're ready, you're given a transference of power from the Nima to the initiate, which officially makes you a Nima. You are not that until you've received that. And with that comes a vast egregore of intelligence. And it's a system that is timeless, that, like when I think of Rupert Sheldrake's work in morphogenic fields, it's exactly that. It's like, how do bees know exactly how to make a perfect geometrical beehive? They're not trained to do it. It's not like the queen bee is going in and training everybody. It's intuitive and it's automatic. It's a conscious, it's like, the idea of monkeys that one monkey does a specific behavior in one place, for example, they learn how to find this particular kind of food that's very difficult to find. And then instantly all the other monkeys know how to do that. It's more than mirror neurons. It's about the morphogenic fields. So when we look at a tradition and a lineage, whether it's Shipibo or whether it's Hopi or whatever tradition it is, there are different ways of passing power. In some traditions, for example, in Mexica, which is from Mexico, which is basically the descendants of the Aztecs, an altar is passed, and that altar has sacred objects that carry the power of that lineage. And when the person receives that, their highest duty is to protect that altar and maintain that altar, like almost with their life, because it's something that's carried, been carried through many generations in such an honor. And sometimes objects are even created through ceremonial practice to make someone an altar, because obviously if there's many generations and things, there's more people, then they can create these sacred objects, and that's sometimes done in the Bwiti tradition. So in the Bwiti tradition, the egregore of Bwiti is every genie, which are kind of like the almost like plant spirits of like fairies or elementals. We have the mermaids. We have the queen of Iboga, who is a mermaid, Dinzona, Matubunge in the Fang tradition. We have many other entities that are connected. And when you receive the power, when you go through the ceremony of receiving that power, then it's like turning on your Verizon phone and having this network that's all around you. And it's every ancestor from that tradition, all of the most powerful Nima from that tradition that have lived before. But it also carries the karma of anything wrong that has happened. And so in our modern world, where specific lineages have been we'll just say need cleansing because of specific behaviors. And this is happening a lot in the Amazon, where there's, different, there's a Mawa elder who said that his lineage had become dirty and he had to go through a process of cleaning the lineage because of things of people in the past that they had done, related to, there's many things that you can do. It can be money, power, sexual energy. And so that's also something to consider when we're thinking about this idea of, this power, that it gets, transferred through basically the initiation. So that's also taking on the karma of that lineage. So it's really important when you're thinking about how you're entering that. So I would say, in a long answer, it's that energy. It's really the energy of being in the elders, that transmission, that receiving of that. Sometimes that's passed on. Sometimes it's just being in the presence. But it's also, as you can tell, the learning in how I'm explaining that, how it has to be so nuanced, because, you really start to develop this discernment. And I think discernment is the most important thing in this path, because it's really easy to get off track or to be tricked, or even entering into spaces where you're working with medicine. There can be beings that you encounter that say that they're one thing and they're actually not that. And so, it's like developing that intelligence.
Absolutely. I love it. I've seen that so clearly in my own work and practice, and in real-time practice I see in people right now, as we're really moving, I can see it clearly, moving from this very mental, intellectual learning to an energetic transmission learning is the future. And it's really becoming clear real time right now. It's really the embodiment of the energy that is the most important factor in a space holder, in a guide, in a facilitator, it's no longer going to be about the letters or the certifications or the things. It's going to be an energetic embodiment and transmission. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tricia. I could talk with you for another 8 hours, but you don't have that. I would love to invite, I know your book is publishing in November. Mm-hmm. And if people want to find you and follow and support your work, I know you have multiple projects going on. So I wanted to give you the floor to talk about your new project in Portugal, what's going on with that, a little bit about your nonprofit, or anything else you'd like to share.
Oh, thank you so much. I really feel, as I shared before, that the most important thing that we focus on is stewardship of the planet. And I think everyone is going to tap in within and find their way and what's theirs to do. But I know that my purpose here is to elevate the voices of the wisdom keepers, the indigenous wisdom keepers. And, I think also acting as a bridge in my understanding, I think helps with that as well. And so, I would just really urge people to go to ancestralheart.com. And even if they give $10, even if whatever they give, just know that you're giving it to something that is bigger than what we all know in terms of how we're utilizing this to bring that wisdom to arenas that really need a transformation of energy. And these are the ultimate people that understand what's going on a spiritual level underneath the government, the White House, our healthcare system, all of these things. And they have decades of experience. And if you're done a lot of work with Navy SEALs, they're super badass. They're the most highly trained, tactical, team that exists. And, I like to think of the indigenous elders as kind of like the spiritual Navy SEALs in a way. And maybe that's discrediting, but what I'm trying to express with that is that, we need to bring out the big guns in this situation. And I definitely feel like I can make contributions, but I would much rather see, someone like Mindahi Bastida, one of the Kogi Mamus, Mamu Jacinto, Rotendo, any of these, elders speaking, and they have no qualms about speaking truth, and they can never be bought. And, some of the most humble people who have not asked for a dime in support, who live very humbly. And I just want to make sure that, they get their life mission and the work that they're here to do fully supported. I feel like that's the most important thing. And the book is really, I think there's a lot of wisdom to help people in these times. And especially if you're embarking on any kind of work related to psychedelics, but also without psychedelics, where you're really going inward, this is the work. And I feel like it provides a scaffolding so that you don't get lost in the quagmire of your unconscious mind. And, you don't get lost in, kind of some of the ways that these tools are being approached. It can help you to develop some discernment in that, and hopefully to also understand this understanding of stewardship, of what stewardship means. And I really believe that if the psychedelic work is not serving nature, then what are we doing here? Because what is it serving, and what road is that going to lead us down? So I think we all got to kind of shift the greater movement's orientation, although there are a lot of positive movements happening. But there's a lot of, focusing on treating conditions and not getting to the root of the problem, not providing the proper integrative practices that actually ground the work into something. And I think this book can be helpful for all of that. And I really hope everyone loves it, because I put a lot of work into it and really in service to my integration of my initiation in 2018 in Gabon. And, really just, thank you for helping me fulfill my integration homework.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's really gorgeous and profound. As I was reading it, I kept popping into Tricia's feed. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, it is really, really beautiful and such a tribute to your body of work. So congratulations on it. And before I let you go, Portugal 2025. What's happening there?
So Azores, that was a message I got in 2019 to build a center, and everything from the name Hue to the location was given to me in meditation. I just regularly meditate every day, was not on psychedelics, but received this message so crystal clear. And then obviously I test every message, and it was, just continued to receive the message. And it took us 5 years to get our building permits approved. Everything in Portugal is so difficult and bureaucratic and slow, and no one really gives you the full picture of what you're getting into. And so we were supposed to start construction a lot sooner, like this year. And I thought we would be open by 2025, but it looks like we'll probably be open more like 2026. And the Azores is essentially a place to bring wisdom from Indigenous elders and different luminaries, people like, who I really respect, like Thomas Hubel, who we mentioned earlier, who, can come together, and, we have the best holistic healing practices really focused on somatic healing. So we have a spa, but it's not like a fluffy, get a facial kind of spa. It's like, let's really get into the soma, because I believe that besides all the other integrative practices, we are really lacking in deep myofascial somatic work, which is something I do on a regular basis. So it's really focused on therapeutic body work to get the trauma out of the body, and some of the best therapists in the world that I've collected from doing retreats for the last 10 years. And, like Himalayan salt room, of course, hot, cold. So we have outdoor saunas as well. They get up to 185, or actually hotter than 185, but we'll be at least 185. And then cold plunge. And then we have hot springs. So on our land. So
beautiful vision.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for all your devotion and work. It's really beautiful to witness. So thank you so much to you. And thank you everybody for listening and sharing time with us. And we'll see you back in a couple weeks. Thanks, Tricia.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.